Okay, so as we get ready to begin our discussion of Shakespeare's play A Midsummer Night's Dream, please watch the video of the PowerPoint that I have on comedic narrative. That's going to be important for understanding this play. Also, it's going to be really important for understanding the your topic for the third essay, which I'll post on Monday. Shakespeare's play is confusing. It's hard to read. The language is antiquated. So please take your time with it. You may want to look at some movie versions that have been done of this play. There's a good one a number of years ago that has Michelle Pfeiffer in it. It's a lot of fun and actually pretty accurate to the text. They may help you get through it. In the videos, I'm going to try to guide you through some of the more important parts, give you some sort of signposts that'll help you find your way through. And then in our discussion, I'll be available not only to respond to your comments, but also, of course, to answer questions that you have as you go along. So let's start at the beginning. Our play begins, and we're in Athens, and we'll find in this play that Shakespeare is going to have a lot of fun. It moves seemingly from the English countryside when we're dealing with Bottom and the rude mechanicals and those other folks trying to put on the play, back to classical Athens where we have the court that's run by Theseus. Right in the beginning, we can see that Theseus is planning to get married. And one of the things I usually call attention to students is remember that first part of comedy we talked about is tension. Something's not quite right. And in the very first line, Shakespeare is going to let us know that that's the case here. We have Theseus, and he's just a few days away from getting married, and we can tell even by the cadence and the tone of his poetry that he's really excited about it. I want you to listen to his words and then listen to his fiance's words and see if you can sense a difference in their levels of enthusiasm. Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires like a stepdame or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue. Oh, he's eager to get married. Now listen to her. 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night, 4 nights will quickly dream away the time, and then the moon, like a silver bow new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities. He's saying that time is going so slow because he can't wait to get married, and she's saying, "Don't worry, it'll go fast enough." There's something not quite right here. Now, Shakespeare's audience would have recognized that this had a lot to do with the circumstances of their marriage, and this is a part of the play that Shakespeare borrowed from a classical Greek writer named Plutarch. You don't need to know that, but this was a marriage to unite two kingdoms, and it's a marriage that's coming after Theseus is successful in battle. So there's going to be some tension. Those two need to be reconciled. That's part of what this comedy is going to be about, and that's one circuit of the narrative that we'll be looking at. But before that can even be developed, we find there's a whole other mess. We have this fellow Aegeus coming in, and sometimes I joke with the class and we say that we know Aegeus is living in tension because Aegeus has a teenage daughter, and in fact, he does have a teenage daughter. Uh, and we've got this whole bunch of teenagers here, and boy, things there are just they're just in a kind of crisis. Aegeus's daughter is Hermia. Hermia is very much in love with Lysander, and that's fine. Aegeus, her father, wants her to marry another young man named Demetrius. Demetrius is very much in love with Hermia. So now we've got two boys in love with the same girl. That's not so good. And the father who wants the girl to marry against her wishes. That's a problem. Then we have Hermia's best friend, Helena. Helena is very much in love with Demetrius, but Demetrius has no time for her. So we have the four teenagers, and they are going to act just like teenagers. Both boys are in love with one girl. One girl has no one in love with her, and a father is trying to force a relationship on a teenage daughter who doesn't want to be in that relationship. Now, Aegeus is, and this is the part where some of you are going to be tempted to say, "Okay, boomer," to Aegeus, and he probably deserves it. Aegeus wants to invoke an old Athens law that will mean that his daughter will either have to marry the person of his choice, or she will, one, either have to live a life of celibacy, or two, she'll be put to death. Now, I want us to keep those ideas of celibacy and death in mind because they're actually going to be very important for understanding the thematic issues within this play. Comedy, as I tell you in the PowerPoint, is about reconciliation. And it's through reconciliation that societies are able to preserve themselves and nature is able to replenish itself. These young lovers, and this will sound offensive, but it's how Shakespearean comedy works. These young lovers are they're young, fertile people. They need to get married. They need to start families. They need to start creating the children that will replace their parents, the people of Aegeus's generation, and eventually replace them. Right from the beginning, we can see that everything's all mixed up because we have they're not matched up together, and the father is actually working as a blocking character. Now, if we think that this play is in some ways about fertility, we can see that with Aegeus threatening to either put his daughter to death or threatening her to a life of celibacy, both of those punishments are stopping the process of reconciliation and then the process of recreation and the process of new life that will allow nature and the society to preserve itself. We'll also find that these young men, and they're Demetrius and Lysander are going to act just like teenage boys. They're impetuous. They're silly. Notice, for example, that the young women seem to be a whole lot smarter. That's something that we see all the time in Shakespearean comedy. Maybe we see it in life too. I'm not sure. Uh, they're erotic desires that need to be channeled into love and commitment for the young women that they're in love with will turn to violent desires. They'll threaten each other. Again, we notice that things are out of tune. What should be a force for creating new life, for creating reconciliation, for creating harmony, instead becomes a potential for violence and death. This is the tension that comedy needs to resolve. So uh, this will go on, and we notice that Demetrius, whose own relationship is little out of joint itself, he seems to recognize that things aren't quite right and that Aegeus's command is not going to help things. He understands the importance of what these four young lovers represent, and he represents the importance of their happiness, not only in terms of their personal benefit, but also in terms of what it will do for society. Uh, the teenagers, of course, are going to come up with a plan, and I'm trying to turn the pages in the book uh, while I'm doing all of this. Lysander, one of the young men, has an old dowager aunt who lives outside of town, and his plan is to run away with Hermia. And if they run away together, they can sneak off and live with the aunt, and they can get secretly married, and he thinks live happily ever after. Well, we'll find out this is a bad plan for a lot of different reasons. Within the logic of comedy, it's it's a bad plan right from the beginning. Remember that one of the things that needs to be renewed, one of the things that needs to be preserved through the creation of new life is the city of Athens itself. If these young lovers run away, then is left without them. And notice all the ties that will be broken. Remember, comedy is about reconciliation. It's about restoring ties between generations, between lovers, between families, between members of a society as a whole. If they run away and separate themselves, then the tie between Hermia and her father is separated. The tie between the two young lovers in the city of Athens is separated. The friendship between Hermia and Helena is breached as well, and that friendship is already threatened because of the romantic entanglements that these young kids find themselves in. It's a bad plan from the beginning, and it's one that's going to throw these four teenagers into a world of tremendous and horrible uncertainty. They're not going to know. Uh, they're going to lose everything when they're in the woods. We'll be laughing at them, and we'll be laughing at them not because we're cruel, horrible people, but rather because we know, because comedy promises us this, that they're going to grow through their experiences, and everything's going to come out okay in the end. But they've got a long ways to go, and their trip into the woods is going to be one of tremendous loss, great sadness, and a great awakening on their part of their own vulnerability. Okay, so scene one wraps up, and then in scene two, we meet some of my favorite characters in this play, and this is Quince the carpenter, Snug the joiner, Bottom the weaver, Flout the bellows mender, all these guys. Uh, I'm just going to talk for a minute a- about them, and then we'll end this video and we'll pick things up in our discussion on Monday. Uh, if you were to take a course in the history of drama, at some point you would learn about medieval drama in Europe. And you would probably learn if you were taking a class in British literature that there were two kinds of plays that existed in medieval Europe. One were the morality plays, and these are plays like Every Man in the Castle of Perseverance that are largely allegorical, right? So you have characters like Every Man who represents everybody, and every man goes on his journey, and eventually, and of course, uh, it's a journey through life, so it's a journey towards death, and the only companion that stays with him is good works, and you can kind of figure out how allegorical plays work. The other plays are the mystery plays, which are actually a whole lot more fun. Plays like the Second Shepherd's Play, which is still actually pretty funny, which try to reveal the mysteries of a particular act of scripture. Both type of plays are religious, and both types of plays developed out of religious ritual. The mystery plays were probably performed during during celebrations, during feast times, which still exists in some of our cities. When we get over over all this pandemic and life starts getting back to normal, there will be churches that will go back to holding their yearly festivals, and they're fundraisers, and they have rides for the kids, and they're sometimes they're celebrations of their patron saints, and these are traditions that have gone on for a long time. They're a great deal of fun, but they're also very important traditions. That's where the mystery plays would have been performed, and they would have been performed by amateur actors. Sometimes they would have been performed by guilds, by groups of craftsmen that formed something like a union, and those unions were sometimes known as mysteries. One of the things we'll notice in this play is that all of these fellows, the ones that are called the rude mechanicals, they they're all involved in, there's a carpenter, there's a joiner who would have assembled furniture, there's a weaver, there's a bellows mender. They're all people who made home crafts. They're members of a guild or a mystery, and they're putting on a play not for a religious festival in this play, but rather for a city festival for Theseus's wedding. They don't know anything about theater. They're bumbling and they're foolish. They probably represent the kinds of folks that would have given Shakespeare growing up in Stratford upon Avon, which would have been at that time a fairly rural part of England. They would have given him his first experience of theater. They are a kind of loving tribute to theater within this play. Now, a couple of things I want us to watch for. Their play, and we'll talk more about this when we're in discussion board. It's the most inappropriate thing in the world uh, for a wedding festival. It's a play about tragic lovers who die. It doesn't seem right for a wedding at all. Notice also that it has a lot to do with death. Notice also that death, right in the beginning, has been evoked in the first minutes or so that this play takes place, with Aegeus threatening his daughter with death if she doesn't follow his commands. This lighthearted play that's about love and it's about romance, and It's about these teenagers who are, just madly in love and infatuated with each other, always has in the background this threat of death. That's part of that renewal cycle. So I want you to watch for that. I also want you to watch for how imagination works within this in this play. And a good hint for that is to watch the imagery of the moon. It's evoked right from the very beginning. The moon becomes a complicated symbol. Uh, it is a symbol of fertility. The moon, as you may have learned somewhere along the road, uh, goes through a cycle of waxing and waning. That's about a 28-day cycle. Well, it's not about, it's a 28-day cycle, which becomes analogous to a woman's reproductive cycle. The moon is also it's mythologically it's associated with the feminine. Think of Diana, the huntress. It's also associated with the imagination. Uh, if the sun, that Apollonian light of pure reason, the light that we experience unfiltered, is representative of reason and logic, the moon, the reflected light, the light that's transformed, becomes reflective of the imagination, the creative process. So I want you to watch for all of those things. Okay, that'll give us enough to get started. Please, for Monday, read through all of Act One and start the beginning of Act Two, where we meet the fairy characters, the supernatural ones. We'll want to look at some of their lines, and there's some absolutely gorgeous poetry there that will help tie some of these themes together. Okay, if you have questions, email, call, or text. Um, Let me know.